What's going on, guys? It's your boy Jacob from Topside MMA, and in today's video, I'm coming at you with my locks and traps for UFC Baku, Fiziev versus Torres. In this video, we're going to break down every single fight on the card, and I'm going to rank off my picks based on my confidence levels, with my most confident picks being at the top with the locks, all the way down to my very least confident picks at the bottom with the traps. You guys know the deal, so without further ado, let's get right into it. Now, first up, we got Almabayev versus Johnson. I got Almabayev as a low confidence pick because I could see this fight going either way. I could see a reality where Charles Johnson could win this fight and pull off the upset. It's just one of these fights where I do think the odds are stacked against him. Now, Charles Johnson in the past has, notoriously struggled with the wrestlers. We saw him fight Ramazan Atemrov. We saw Magomedov. We saw Cody Durden. I mean, all these guys have presented quite a bit of problems for a guy like Charles Johnson in the past, specifically with the wrestling and the grappling. Hell, even Odie Osborne was taking him down years ago. He has struggled with the takedown defense. And it's not even to say that he has bad takedown defense. It's just something that he has struggled with in the past. So against a guy like Asu Almabayev, who is a pressure wrestler, it probably will present some problems that he has to get through. You could argue even in his last fight against Brunno Silva, he did struggle with the wrestling. And it wasn't even necessarily that Brunno Silva was landing a ton of takedowns. It was just more so he was getting controlled quite a bit throughout that fight. So I think against a guy like Asu Almabayev, who is improving from fight to fight, it's going to be a tough matchup. On the feet, I still would favor Charles Johnson if this were a boxing match for 15 minutes, but unfortunately for him, it's not a boxing match. We got ourselves an MMA fight, obviously, so I think Asu Almabayev's wrestling is probably just going to be consistent enough. I think he can probably do enough throughout each round to win the round overall, winning at least 2 out of the 3 rounds total. Even though Charles Johnson is live on the feet, I don't want to write him off. That's why I have this as a low confidence pick, because if Asu Almabayev cannot land takedowns, we have seen him struggle in the past. Even like an Alex Perez, he was arguably losing that fight up until he found that late finish in the 3rd round. And it goes to show, if he can't land takedowns, it could be tricky, and I think he will be a step behind on the feet, especially against a guy like Charles Johnson, who has a unique frame for this weight class. He's taller and longer than most guys, so I think Asu Almabayev will struggle on the feet. So Charles Johnson is live. It's just one of those things, too. If this fight were taking place maybe 2 years ago, I would pick Charles Johnson, but, the age factor flying across the world for this fight, for a guy like Charles Johnson, there are some aspects of this fight that definitely go against him. So low confidence pick for Asu Almabayev. Next up, we got Donchenko versus Berggren. Now, I like Donchenko. I'm just not completely sold on Donchenko just yet, because he's one of these guys where I watched his last 2 fights back, and the cardio has been a struggle in both of them. Against Alex Morono, he went the full distance there. He really should have probably got a finish in that spot. It was surprising that he didn't. However, he really I don't want to say his cardio fell off a cliff, but he slowed down quite a bit beyond that 1st round. To his credit, he did go for that finish. He was pushing it really hard in the 1st round, but still, I thought about if he was fighting someone else other than Alex Morono, who had a little bit better cardio, he could have been in real trouble in the 2nd and 3rd round of that fight. Alex Morono was just fighting off of one working leg, and he really had nothing left, so I really don't think he presented too many problems, but I think a different level of competitor could have probably pushed the pace there a bit more and probably presented some problems for him. And even the fight that he had before that, where he was fighting for the Ultimate Fighter finale there, even in that fight, it was a 1st round finish, but he was starting to slow down even in that 1st round. The reason why I'm saying this is because Berggren has never been knocked out before. So let's say if we get ourselves into a long decision, we go with full 15 minutes, I think there's a chance that Berggren could make this fight interesting. There is a chance, because I don't think Donchenko really, if he doesn't have enough knockout power to get a guy like Alex Morono out of there, he might not have enough to get a guy like Berggren out of there. I'm not saying that's the case here. Alex Morono, the ref, arguably could have stopped that fight multiple times, and Donchenko is a finisher. It's not to say that, he just doesn't have any knockout power. He most definitely does. He's extremely vicious and violent, especially when he gets guys hurt. He is like a shark smelling blood. It's absolutely insane what he can do. It's just one of those, I've never seen Berggren really knocked out before. We have seen him struggle in the past on the regional scene with the takedowns and the grappling. He's really shown holes in his game in that regard, which are concerning. But Donchenko, he is a guy who wants to stand and bang and knock your head off. He has gotten a good amount of working with guys like Yaroslav Amosov, who's a high-level grappler in and of himself. So I think Donchenko's grappling is going to improve at a rapid rate for such a young kid as well. It's just, for some reason, I got a little bit of doubt in my head. He is 24 years old. He is pretty green. We haven't really seen him tested in a war at the UFC level. And I'm not saying that Berggren is going to be that guy. It's just, if it were to happen, he might not look like a minus 500 like the line implies. So that's why I'm kind of bringing the line into it a little bit here. And also we have to consider too, Berggren is taking this fight on very short notice. We know Donchenko was supposed to fight Andreas Gustafsson, but he had to pull out. He had some heart issue he was dealing with. So Berggren stepping up on short notice. That definitely favors a guy like Donchenko. And even, I would probably give Berggren possibly the cardio advantage if they had a full camp, if both of them did. But with the short notice step up, I can't really have any confidence to where his cardio is going to be at because it's a short notice step up. So there's a lot of factors here at play. I think Donchenko definitely has the higher upside. He hasn't struggled in the grappling like a guy like Berggren has. I think he should be the more dangerous guy on the feet as long as his cardio holds up. I think Donchenko gets the job done. It's just I really hope he will make improvements with the cardio because although he hasn't been punished for it just yet, I do have some worries for the future. But anyway, next up, we got Magomedov versus Oleksiejczuk. This fight it's tough to break down, but at the same time, I think it's easy to break down because on one hand, I say it's tough to break down because I think either guy could definitely win here. I think the line being at about a pick'em makes perfect sense. However, I think it's easy to break down in the sense of I think Magomedov is probably going to, I don't want to say dominate in the first round, but I think he really could have quite a bit of grappling success early on in this fight. It's just a matter of if Oleksiejczuk slows down or not. Really, I think that's what this fight comes down to because we saw Magomedov in his last fight against Joe Pyfer. People remember the finish, where he got finished in the second round. His cardio didn't look great. Durability didn't look great. However, people forget about that first round. He absolutely dominated Joe Pyfer in the grappling. Joe Pyfer initiated the grappling. Abbas reversed the position, absolutely dominated Joe Pyfer, who is an extremely strong, explosive guy and who actually does have some grappling in his arsenal. Whereas a guy like Oleksiejczuk, he moved to the fighting nerds, like a year ago, but he is traditionally a striker. He's not known for his grappling. So if Abbas Magomedov could dominate Joe Pyfer in the grappling, you better believe he could do the same thing to Michel Oleksiejczuk. The problem is, though, both these guys have shown issues in the cardio. So if this fight extends, I can't really have a lot of faith in either guy, and who knows? There is a chance that Oleksiejczuk could come out here and flatline Abbas Magomedov in the very first round because these guys kind of both have their strengths and weaknesses. They both have struggled with the cardio, so who knows? Michel Oleksiejczuk, kind of like how I said, Abbas Magomedov will be dangerous with the grappling early on in the first round. Michel Oleksiejczuk will be extremely dangerous on the feet in the first round when he has a lot of oomph in his hands, when he's fresh. So I could see either guy pulling ahead here. I could see Abbas getting a round 1 submission. I could see Michel Oleksiejczuk getting a round 1 knockout. If this fight extends beyond the first round, I think it's probably going to get ugly and real sloppy real quick. And at that point, who the hell knows? But I think if I were to put, a official prediction for this fight, I think Magomedov will be able to probably take Michel Oleksiejczuk down for the first round. I think he likely wins the first round. Outside of him getting knocked out by some crazy shot, I think he probably will take Michel down, win the first round. I think he could submit Michel Oleksiejczuk too. So I'm gonna ride with Abbas Magomedov by submission for now. But there's good arguments for either side. If you think Michel Oleksiejczuk is going to flatline Abbas, I can't blame you one bit at all. But anyway, next up we got Magomedov versus Pereira. At this point, I am looking to fade Michel Pereira in every single fight he will have at the UFC level. At this point, I genuinely am because I have gotten to the point where Michel Pereira, I genuinely believe, all allegedly, no proof, but he's one of these guys where I have questions about him being potentially paid off. No proof, allegedly, no proof. But I have my concerns, and we are now fighting in the part of the world that heavily favors a guy like Shara Magomedov. And if there were any country for Michel Pereira to take a dive for a little bit of the moolah, where do you think he might get a little offer under the table? You better believe it could be in Azerbaijan. Probably the only other place that would be as good would be, I don't know, maybe Saudi Arabia, maybe Russia, I don't know. But Azerbaijan could be one of those places where Michel Pereira takes the money under the table. Allegedly. No proof. Allegedly. Rumors. All allegedly. No proof. But if it were to happen, call me a tinfoil hat conspiracist all you want. I think this would be the place. And that's the thing, too. It's not like Michel Pereira is this amazing top elite level fighter who's just seemed like he shit the bed. I mean, he's had these fights where he went to war against Zach Reese, and I thought he lost that fight pretty handily. He got the decision there. Before then, he get knocked out by Dawkins in the first round. That wasn't a good look there either. It's like he's had these moments where it's like, damn, Is Michel Pereira, is he just washed at this point? I think that's a good argument. Or you could argue, he's maybe doing some things behind the scenes, because you cannot watch that fight back that he had against Abus Magomedov and look yourself in the mirror and say, yep, he was fighting as hard as he could. He gave it all he had. That was the best Michel Pereira we're going to see. He gave it everything. You cannot do that. That was the fight that really made me think there might be some shady shit going on. So for all those reasons, it's kind of stuff outside of the fight itself. But it's still very important for me for this type of a breakdown, because I think Shara Magomedov is very beatable. I don't think he's an elite fighter, because obviously the man only has one eye. I think it's very impressive what he's done throughout his career with only one eye. But at a certain point, he's going to hit a cap. He's not going to be able to get the belt with one eye. It's just not going to happen, as unfortunate as that is. I like his style. He wants to stand and bang. It can be a little bit of point fighty at times, but you know what? I can't really blame the guy all that much. But anyway, in this fight, I think Shara should be the more dangerous striker on the feet. Michel Pereira at this point in his career has seemed to fallen off of a cliff a bit. I really don't think he has the better durability whatsoever. Shara Magomedov can eat absolute bombs on the feet. Even in his last fight, was a little bit closer than I wanted to see it go. However, he ate some nukes on the feet. He ate some bombs, some big shots. His chin seemed to hold up pretty fine. I forget if it was his last fight or the one before where his nose was absolutely blown up too. I mean, it was pretty rough, and he still was able to toughen it out. So I don't worry about the heart or the durability of Shara, whereas I most definitely do with Michel Pereira. I worry about pretty much everything with Michel Pereira. I mean, the heart, the will to win, the durability. I worry about just about everything. So for those reasons, and this little bit of a rant will come to an end here, I have to ride with Shara Magomedov. But anyway, next up, we got Aliskerov versus Brunno Ferreira. You guys know I'm not normally the type of guy to take the big underdog picks. Sometimes I'm a little bit soft. I'm thinking, or I might have them as a trap, and I say, I'm still going to pick the big favorite. But, I think there's a chance they might, shit the bed there. I'm riding with Brunno Ferreira this week. It might be crazy, and I understand why people are taking Aliskerov as the pick. I completely get it. I just can't do it, because this is one of those weeks where if I pick Aliskerov and he gets knocked the hell out in the first round, I am going to be so upset with myself for not taking the pick. So I'd much rather pick Brunno Ferreira and be wrong, as opposed to not going with my boy and seeing him get the win, if that makes sense. Because I think Brunno Ferreira has the clear finishing upside here. You have to go back, watch the fight that Aliskerov had against Jung Young Park. If he was in that spot, if you flipped out Jung Young Park with Brunno Ferreira and you saw the shots that he was landing, that Jung Young Park was landing on Ikram Aliskerov, if you threw Brunno Ferreira in that exact spot, landing those same shots, Ikram Aliskerov is going night-night. I mean, Ikram Aliskerov was hittable. He was eating shot after shot against Jung Young Park. That's the thing, though. Jung Young Park has no knockout power. Look through the man's UFC record. He is decision or submission. That's it. He is not knocking dudes out. And a guy like Brunno Ferreira is not that guy. You cannot eat that many shots that Ikram Aliskerov did against Jung Young Park compared to a guy like Brunno Ferreira, who really has a lot of power in the hands. And if you watch Ikram, if you see him get chinned, I mean, Kamzat did it years ago. We saw Whitaker run right through him. Brunno Ferreira has probably more power than both of those guys. He's raw power. He has a lot of it, especially early on when he's fresh. Brunno Ferreira, he can absolutely crack on the feet. And I think it takes is one shot. One shot, and Aliskerov will go down. Now, there's the chance he doesn't get that one shot. There is the chance that Aliskerov, comes out here shooting takedowns. And if this fight gets to, I don't know, maybe a round and a half, if it hits the 7.5 minute mark, Brunno Ferreira is probably cooked, because he's going to lose the power in his hands. He's not going to be as explosive, as quick. He is at a race disadvantage here. It's going to be a bit tougher for him to get to the target, and he's going to have Aliskerov, shooting takedowns constantly. The threat is going to be in the back of his mind. So the longer this fight extends, Aliskerov probably will take over. I imagine if they go a full 15 minutes, Aliskerov will be the one getting his hand raised. It's just early on. I think Brunno Ferreira is more than live to crack a guy like Aliskerov, who really, his striking is decent. He has a decent jab. He has a couple kicks he'll throw out. But besides that, he doesn't really have anything that should be super threatening to a guy like Brunno Ferreira. We have seen Brunno Ferreira knocked out before. Don't get it wrong. I understand he could get cracked in the spot, but I think the finishing upside early on in the first round is going to heavily favor a guy like Brunno Ferreira, and I think he can get the job done. And I think there's a little bit of recency bias here too. We saw Brunno Ferreira, he's coming off of a bad knockout loss against Gregory Rodriguez. Ikram Aliskerov just got the nice win over Jung Young Park. I think this line is heavily inflated. When I broke this fight down, I thought maybe you could give Aliskerov maybe like a -130, -140 line, you know, because he does have the wrestling upside. He probably has the slightly better cardio, even though his cardio is not that great. But seeing him as a -300 favorite, I was like, absolutely not. That's probably the worst parlay piece you could have of this entire event would be Ikram Aliskerov. And that's not even like he could win this fight. He's obviously favored to win the fight. It's not about winning or losing. It's you're taking a guy like Ikram Aliskerov who has meh striking, and he's really wrestler bust, and he has chin and cardio concerns, and he's going against the Hulk. Give me Bruno Ferreira by vicious round 1 knockout. Next up, we got Fiziev versus Torres in the main event. I like Torres this week, going with another underdog with my boy Manuel Torres. The reason why that's kind of led me to this pick, I have it as a low confidence pick for a reason. I think pick of line makes perfect sense here. It makes perfect sense in my mind, at least, because I could see either guy having success. I could see either guy getting their hand raised. The reason why I'm leaning with my boy Torres this week is purely because of the last fight that Rafael Fiziev had. That fight, I picked Fiziev to beat, what's his name? Mauricio Ruffi. I picked him in that last fight, and my God, watching that fight back was like it's like nails on a chalkboard. It was infuriating to watch because you look at the fight before that Fiziev had against Bahamondes. He's sticking to a smart game plan. He's having success on the feet. He's initiating a little bit of a grappling. You know, he's landing a couple takedowns here and there. He's kept Bahamondes guessing the whole time. Perfect. He fought amazing. You know, Fiziev was sticking to a smart game plan. Like I said, he kept Bahamondes guessing with the takedown threat, especially later in rounds 2 and round 3. He looked good. And then in the fight with Mauricio Ruffi, the first round was very competitive, but the second round, he starts getting lit up on the feet. The man refused to even shoot a takedown. And that was after Mauricio Ruffi just got ragdolled by Benoit Saint-Denis the fight before. It absolutely blew my mind how astonishingly poor the fight IQ was in that spot from Fiziev. He didn't even attempt to grapple until he was on the verge of death and he was on chicken legs. Absolutely horrendous fight IQ. So in this type of a fight, I can't trust him to come out here and shoot takedowns against Torres. I don't trust him. I don't trust him to stick to a smart game plan. And at range, I think Fiziev is going to be in trouble from distance. I genuinely do. I think Torres is going to be too quick, too fast. And that's the thing. You know, people will call it the knockout loss that he had against Bahamondes, but Bahamondes versus Fiziev, they're two different beasts. You know, Fiziev is short and stocky, maybe a little bit more raw power, whereas Bahamondes, he's longer, he's taller, not as much, you know, raw power in the hands. They're different archetypes, you know, and Torres would struggle against a guy like Bahamondes. It makes sense with the reach disadvantage there, or at least he's not used to quite dealing with taller and lengthier guys at this weight class. But against a guy like Fiziev, this is his bread and butter. This is where I see Torres looking great on the feet. He looked fantastic in his last fight, and that was more of a grappling threat compared to a guy like Fiziev. So I think Manuel Torres is very live for the round 1 brutal knockout over Fiziev. The only thing, though, obviously, if this fight extends, if Fiziev can survive the first round, he's probably going to win the fight. That's what this ultimately comes down to. If this somehow can get to the second round, or even somehow the third, yeah, Torres is probably cooked. Fiziev probably does have the better cardio. Not even probably. I can almost guarantee you he does. He probably can go a lot longer if this fight were to extend. So if this fight hits the second, you might want to start considering a live play on Fiziev because it's probably going to be rough for our boy Torres. But I don't think it's going to get that far, honestly. I think Torres can get it done in 1, like McGregor. But anyway, next up, we got Ruziboev versus Pulyaev. I've been a little bit conflicted on this because I have been the type of person who is a bit of a Ruziboev believer. I think not a lot of people believe in Ruziboev, and I think Ruziboev is kind of underrated, honestly. I think he's a bit underrated. And now, not to just talk about him, to give our boy Andrey Pulyaev a little bit of credit, he looked pretty good in his last fight. Even though he lost, he nearly got knocked out twice. He looked a lot better than people thought he was going to look, myself included in that. So I will put a lot of respect on him, you know, for that last performance. Even in a loss, he still outstruck a guy like Almabayev, which was impressive to me. However, this fight really comes down to the fact that I think Ruziboev is just the more well-rounded mixed martial artist. You look at the man's record, he's young, he's only 32, but he has about 800 professional fights. It's absolutely insane. You look through him, he's a finisher, man. He'll knock people out, he'll submit them, he can do it all. And I think Ruziboev is probably the more well-rounded mixed martial artist compared to a guy like Pulyaev, who is a strict kickboxer. I mean, Pulyaev, we saw when he was in the clinch against Christian Leroy Duncan, he looked like a fish out of water. He had no idea how to get back to space. It was a tough look. CLD absolutely teed off on him. And I really think a guy like Ruziboev can kind of mix it up in that sense too. He can tee off from range, initiate the clinch. Hell, he might even land a takedown of his own. And I think he's just going to have more tools in his arsenal compared to a guy like Andrey Pulyaev. However, if this is a back and forth kickboxing match for 15 minutes, it could be competitive. You know, Pulyaev, he did impress me in his last fight, even in a loss, because if Almabayev did not have that raw, explosive power to hurt a guy like Pulyaev, he could have lost that fight. You know, the power really kind of saved his ass there. He was able to rock Pulyaev, drop him twice, but, you know, if it didn't go that way, it could have been different. So, like I said, I put respect on Pulyaev after that fight, but I think Ruziboev will have more ways to win this fight, so got to ride with him as a slight favorite this week. Anyway, if you guys like the content, help your boy out with the algorithm. Drop a like, drop a comment, subscribe if you're new. It goes a long way. So thank you guys so much for all the love on the videos. Who do we have next up? We got Hasanov versus Nolan. Now we got Hasanov, who is a UFC debut. He's new. First time a lot of people are going to be seeing him. The man looks like a Greek god. I mean, he's extremely jacked, extremely chiseled, and he kind of fights like it. You know, he's kind of like a bully out there. He's looking to just manhandle dudes, and it makes sense. He kind of looks like it. But he does have a background in freestyle wrestling. That's what he was known for before transitioning to MMA a little bit later in life, because he's like 30-something, and he only has 5 fights. So it's kind of interesting to see how little experience he has, even though he is a bit of an older guy. Just had a late start, but like I said, he did have that base in freestyle wrestling. However, you kind of watch some of his fights back, and I don't want to say he's struggling with the wrestling, but for someone who has, you know, like the Master of Sport wrestling accolade that they use, it's like a term or a prestigious thing they use in Russia. It was originally from the Soviet Union. I was looking into this the other day. But anyway, for his accolades for freestyle wrestling, I was expecting a bit more because there were some fights I saw. One fight in particular, I'm blanking on the guy's name off the top of my head. He had like a 3-1 record overall. I'm pulling it up as I'm talking here. But he had a 3-1 record, and this man was struggling to take him down. In the first round, he couldn't land a single takedown whatsoever. I'm like, for someone that has the accolades, you know, of a Master of Sport freestyle wrestler, I was a bit concerned. It definitely was I don't want to say a red flag, but it was something that caught my attention. It was Mark-Ari Lewis, 3-1 back in 2025, June 20th of 2025. So it just goes to show, there have been these moments where I've been like, ooh, that was a little bit underwhelming from what I was expecting. However, he is vicious. You know, once he gets guys to the ground, his ground and pound is absolutely nasty. It is vicious. He really hurts dudes. And if he takes Eric Nolan down in the spot, he's going to beat the piss out of him, genuinely, because we know Eric Nolan has struggled with the grappling in the past, so I do worry if it gets there. However, if Eric Nolan can keep this fight on the feet, he's going to be the better striker, because I think Hasanov, his real weakness is his striking, not from a power sense. Like, he does have quite a bit of power. He can really crack dudes on the feet. The thing is, though, his technical striking from that aspect is just not great. You know, he's kind of like, he's one of these guys where I kind of rip on Ivan Ursulan for this, where he's one of these guys where he's an orthodox fighter and his left hand, his lead hand, is pretty much non-existent. He might throw a couple jabs here and there. He might have a lead hook or two, but there's really hardly any power. There's nothing really on it. And you can tell he's not throwing anything with any real intentions with his lead hand. Every strike that he's throwing with the left hand is just a little pillow shot that's looking to set up the right hand. The right overhand is like the shot that he spams over and over and over again. And after you watch a fight or two from this man, it gets pretty predictable. It's pretty easy to pick up on that he's just looking to swing that right overhand with everything that he has and going behind him. Because like, even when he fights, you watch his fights back and he has his arm, it's like pivoted. It's almost like a spring that's like cocked. Like, it's not like a guard. Like, he's not protecting himself. He just has it like spring loaded, kind of like a cannon. I don't know how to describe it, but you can tell it's like the man is just looking to swing the right overhand and knock his opponent unconscious. He's trying to put 100% power into it. And like I said, it does get a bit predictable. So I think in the sense of the technical striking between the two of these two gentlemen, I have to ride with my boy Nolan. I think he's the far more technical striker on the feet. So in this fight, I think it really comes down to the cardio of both gentlemen. We have seen them both slow down in previous fights, so I do have question marks and concerns for both of them. But I think it really comes down to the takedown defense. If the cardio is even between these two, the takedown defense will be the make or break. Because I think if Hasanov lands takedowns in the second and third round, he probably could finish a guy like Eric Nolan. I really think he could. His ground and pound is that vicious. I think he has what it takes to finish Nolan. But if he can't, I think Nolan could for sure win this fight. I could see him pulling the upset off here if he's able to keep it on the feet, where he is the more technical guy overall. The other thing we have to talk about with Nolan too he has been dealing with some injuries. He had a little bit of a layoff. I couldn't figure out exactly what the injury was. I was trying to look it up and do some research. I couldn't find it, so I don't know exactly what he was struggling with, but he has struggled with some type of injury. Now he's flying across the world. There are those little aspects of the game that are, kind of holding me back. And also, Hasanov is the local guy. He's going to be the Azerbaijani fighter. However, he is training at American Top Team in the United States, so he is flying over there as well. So it's not like he's just in his backyard or something like that in Baku. But the crowd definitely will be going for him, as that's where his roots are. But anyway, going to ride with Hasanov as a pick. Not extremely confident in him, but I think he does get the job done over Eric Nolan. Really, it's going to come down to his takedown defense. And what we've seen so far from Nolan, I can't say I'm all that confident that he can keep it on the feet. I give him a little bit of leeway for the Yakhyaev fight. That was extremely short notice in upper weight class. I put a ton of respect on him for that fight. I'm going to be rooting for Eric Nolan. I hope he wins. I just think it's a tough-ass matchup for him. But anyway, next up, we got Yakhyaev versus Walker. I was going to make this a lock, but I think it's the PTSD from Gaethje to Poirier has just prevented me. I need a little bit of a breather. I need a little vacation from the lock picks because that did irreversible damage. So we're having Yakhyaev as a high confidence pick. This is no surprise to anyone. I just think he has every path to win in this regard. We've seen from Walker, the chin is a problem. I mean, if you're getting rocked and wobbled by Rafael, I can only imagine what Abdul Rakhman Yakhyaev is going to do to his chin, and I worry about him. And with Yakhyaev, we have seen him go long before. We've seen him go to 25-minute decision before back on the regional scene. We've seen him finish guys by knockout, by submission. The man is extremely violent. He should have an advantage pretty much everywhere on the feet. I do think striking, we did see against this fight when he had against Brinson Ribeiro, there were moments in that fight where I was like, damn, he was getting hit a little bit. It was a little bit of a, didn't love that. However, we saw how that fight ended. So we know the man can deal with a little bit of adversity and get past it. And I just don't think I don't think Julius Walker is the guy to be the guy who's the big test for him. I don't think this is the big, we need to see if he can get past this test. I don't think we've got there yet. And we will. I think Yakhyaev, we're going to get to a point. He's going to have to get a step up in competition at some point where we're going to have to see, okay, can he pass this test? I just don't think Julius Walker's that guy. I really don't. I think his cardio is a concern. I think his chin's a concern. Even Rafael Sakari in that third round was out-dogging him. That was a concern. I mean, there are just too many concerns I have for Julius Walker when I really don't have hardly any concerns for Yakhyaev. I think he's probably going to get a round one finish here. Even in that last fight against Dustin Jacoby that Julius Walker had, that was no bueno. That was no bueno. And I put respect on Dustin Jacoby in his striking. But, I mean, Walker nearly died 8 times in that first round. Should have been called off a lot earlier. But regardless, I think Yakhyaev has everything it takes to have the same exact outcome like we saw in the Dustin Jacoby fight. But anyway, next up, we got Sadikov versus Camilo. Now, I like Sadikov in this spot. I think this is a good bounce back spot for our boy Nazim Sadikov, and I think the cards are stacked in his favor this week. I think a guy like Camilo, he's extremely young, he's green, he's learning on the job, and he is going to improve from fight to fight. The thing that worries me about Camilo, though, is that we've seen a hole in one in his cardio and two in kind of like his heart overall. We've seen in his last 2 fights at the UFC level, he's had these moments where it's kind of been a bit of a concern in the sense of like his heart and his will to win and how he's going to push through the fire. Whereas Nazim Sadikov, he's not that guy. He's not that guy. Nazim Sadikov is an absolute beast. He's one of my favorite prospects. He's an absolute dog. He is willing to go to war. He's an absolute specimen. So if you have any type of doubt or concern or heart issue, potentially, and you're going against Nazim Sadikov, it's going to be a rough day in the office, not to mention the fact that Sadikov is fighting in front of his home people. It's going to fire him up even more, and I think he's going to probably get Camilo out of there, because we've seen Camilo, he's had moments where he's looked good. Watch the Gabe Green fight back. He looks good early on in the first round. Second round, goes for a submission. He can't get it, gasses himself out. And he really kind of seemed like he gave up in that spot. He really seemed like he was just kind of looking for the way out. He seemed like he really could have fought more, but he was just exhausted. He was done. He was mentally checked out. He got submitted shortly after. Then you watch the fight back that he had against Slavoklas. It wasn't the most inspiring performance, to be honest with you guys. I remember it on paper in my head thinking, okay, Camilo was pretty dominant in that spot. I watched that fight back this morning. I was thinking, damn. It wasn't that good of a performance. I mean, in the third round, he's exhausted. Slavoklas is walking him down, doubling him up on significant strikes. Not the best look there. You can argue, well, Camilo, at least he beat Slavoklas. We saw Sadikov go to a draw. I'm not holding that against Sadikov. I'm not holding that against him. I'm looking more recently. I'm looking at the recent fights. Camilo just fought Slavikos very recently, or I guess within the last year or so, and it really wasn't the best look in terms of his overall cardio. Within the first, I don't know, after a round and a half, he was slowing down. He was really kind of gassed in that spot. Not death gassed or anything, but it was a concern. And I think if you have any of those types of concerns with the heart or the cardio, you're going against Sadikov, it's going to be a rough day. So I think Sadikov has a lot more crack in the hands. I think he has more overall power. He should be able to keep this fight on the feet. I think he has better cardio the longer this fight extends as well. I think Sadikov will likely ramp up the longer this fight goes. And I think he has the ways to win this fight. So I'm going to ride with my boy Sadikov. Honestly, I think he gets it done. Maybe by decision, but I'm going to say, let's say a little Nazim Sadikov by knockout. Anyway, next up, we got Almabayev versus Matsumoto. This fight is one where I have gone back and forth the most. I think there are great arguments to be made for either gentleman in this spot. Because you can look at a guy like Matsumoto and say, okay, he just lost a split decision to Rob Font in the big, 2025 when that fight took place. That's a bit of a concern. But then you could also argue, well, Rob Font went for the cheeky vet, not even cheeky vet, it was a pretty slimy move where he went for the fake glove touch, rocked Matsumoto, and arguably won the entire fight because of that. Pretty scumbag move if you ask me. But you could argue, because of that fight, because of that one moment, maybe that's why he lost that split overall. You could argue Jin Matsumoto's record is better than it implies on paper. Even in his last fight against Basharat, he looked pretty good. He impressed me in that last fight. So I do put credit on Jin Matsumoto. I give him credit. I give him his flowers. But then you got a guy like Almabayev who really, you could say, well, he knocked down Umar. That's probably some of the most adversity Umar's dealt with in his entire career. And I'd say that's damn right. He looked pretty good in that fight early on. The rest of that fight, was a different story. He got grapple fucked the entire rest of that fight. However, he had moments in that first round, And then you could say, well, he fought Topuria. He fought Alexander Topuria. Obviously, the man was in he was in for a tough fight there. I didn't love that fight, though. Even watching that fight back, I'm like, damn. There were moments in that fight, not even just moments. The majority of that fight, Almabayev was getting rocked, and he did not like the power coming back his way, and he was not having a good time. It almost seemed like he was scared for his life out there at moments, which was a concern. But now we're going against Jin Matsumoto, who doesn't really have that level of just raw knockout power like an Alexander Topuria does. So it's kind of hard to figure out how this is going to match up, because on one hand, I do like the power upside for Almabayev. I think if either guy is going to land the big shot to rock the other one, I think it's probably going to be Almabayev landing that big shot. However, you look at Jin Matsumoto, he has the far higher volume. He's going to be landing more strikes. He's willing to throw more. He's really kind of going to probably win minutes just through the volume alone if Almabayev cannot rock him. Then you look at the grappling upside in favor of Jin Matsumoto. He's grappling a little bit more. He's going to be shooting more takedowns. Like we saw even in his last fight, he was landing quite a few takedowns, which was impressive in that spot. His overall control is not great. He let Basharat back to the feet. He wasn't able to really gain that much control time for the amount of takedowns that he landed, but still, he was able to land multiple takedowns. Looks good on the scorecards there. So I think there's great arguments to be made for both guys. This is one I actually want to spend a little bit more time doing some more research on, going back and watching some more tape, see if I can find anything. Because as of right now, I'd say this line should be about a pick 'em. I think either guy could win. So I'm kind of riding with Matsumoto ever so slightly, but don't really have a whole lot behind it. Like I said, I think it should be a pick 'em. I think either guy can get their hand raised. Anyway, next up, we've got Offley versus Reyes. Now, Offley is coming off of a decision win where I watched the fight back that he had with Iza. I'm not going to say it was a robbery. I would say it was a poor decision. I just watched it back. I'm not going to say it's a full-blown robbery, because I'm really thinking that third round, Iza kind of pissed it away by not doing more when he could have. They both were slow. They both really, I don't want to say the round could have gone either way. I think it should have gone towards Iza. He landed takedowns at the end of the round. Should have been enough to secure it overall. It was 1-1 going into that third. I think he should have won the fight overall, but I do put respect on the performance that Khan Offley gave in that spot. He did look good, at least in the first round. The third round, it was competitive, so I'm not going to say it was some heinous robbery. But anyway, my point is, Khan Offley, he's being written off a bit. I think I don't think he's as bad as people think that he is. I think he has shown a bit at the UFC level that's been a bit impressive overall, even from the hands to the grappling. Even his striking against Iza looked decent outside of that second round, but he had moments of his own. He rocked Iza in the first round, and Iza is a dangerous striker. Put respect on him there. And his grapplings look decent, like Ricardo Ramos, that fight. Bit of a weird one with the referee and whatnot in Brazil. Kind of got lucky there, but I mean, his grappling looked decent there. And against Reyes, he's had some hiccups of his own. I mean, we saw him nearly get knocked out in his last fight against a 40-year-old Douglas, so that wasn't the best look either. The main thing that's kind of leaning me towards Reyes here is, one, the durability. And I know I say he just got rocked in his last fight against a 40-year-old man, but the 40-year-old man had real knockout power. He had some oomph in his hands. Power's the last thing to go. So I think in terms of the durability, we've seen awfully hurt and rocked many more times compared to a guy like Reyes. So I think Reyes probably has the slight durability. And the thing that I like about Reyes in this fight too is I don't think either of these guys have elite striking. Reyes probably even more so. But look at the man's reach advantage he has in the spot. Statistically, it heavily favors our boy Reyes. And then if we're talking about the grappling, Khan awfully has been able to rely on the grappling in past fights. He's not going to be able to do that against Javier Reyes. Javier Reyes does have a decent grappling game. He has great cardio. I'd actually give the cardio advantage to Reyes in this fight too. So I think the longer this fight goes on, the more it will favor Reyes overall. So in this fight, I'm going to go with the biological factors here. Reyes has the large reach advantage in this fight. He has the better cardio. I think the grappling will be decently comparable, but I'd say Reyes probably has the better wrestling straight up between the two of them. So I think there's just more reasons to go with Reyes this week. And you could argue Khan awfully is what, I don't know, 1-3 or whatever in the UFC at this point. It's because I don't really think he deserved to win that last fight. Or at least with Javier Reyes, he's an up-and-coming prospect at this point. A little bit older, but we haven't seen the best from him yet. I think he will improve, probably a bit more than awfully. So going to ride with Reyes as the pick this week. And then finally, we got Abdulayev versus Nascimento. Now, at the time of recording this, I don't even know what the line is at for these two gentlemen. I have no idea. The lines are not out. This is a last-minute fight that they have placed between these two gentlemen. It's a bit of a weird one, but it should be a fun fight. I have done my tape on both of these gentlemen, and what I can tell you from all of my research and my analysis is, who the hell knows? Because I think both of these guys are decent. But I think both of these guys have holes in their game, respectively. I think a guy like Nascimento, he's proven he's a dog. He can hang. He has some real power in the hands. He's decent everywhere. He wants to stand and strike, but he's more than comfortable to grapple in his fights as well. The thing I don't love about Nascimento that I've seen is the fight IQ. The fight IQ is pretty questionable. He's made some real stupid decisions throughout multiple fights that I've seen from him, which is a concern for me. And however, though, he's fought a decent level of competition. He's the interim champ in the LFA right now. He's fought a lot of undefeated prospects in the past. He's looked pretty good against some pretty decent names overall. And against a guy like Abdulayev, he's decent overall. Abdulayev, he's kind of one of these guys where he can hang. He can hang everywhere, but he does have his strength in the grappling and in the wrestling, because on the distance striking, it's not great. From what I saw, it wasn't anything too inspiring overall. I didn't love the striking. I saw him getting lit up by some lower level of competition, and then he would instantly just kind of default to his wrestling and grappling. And even in his last couple fights, he was getting pieced up on the feet. Not quite pieced up, but he was dealing with some adversity on the feet against lower level guys. Then he just shoots a takedown and is able to choke these guys out in a couple seconds. So it's like, obviously, he's not the most comfortable on the feet, and for his record, it was a bit surprising. I was expecting a bit more overall. But in this type of a fight, I don't see him submitting Nascimento. He might be the better wrestler overall, but I don't think he's just going to be able to just ragdoll a guy like Nascimento, who I believe is a BJJ black belt. So I don't worry about Nascimento getting subbed. And on the feet, I will lean with Nascimento ever so slightly. I think he probably has a bit more raw power. He's a weird build for this weight class. He's a bit shorter, a bit stockier. He's not going to have some crazy reach and height advantage. He's used to dealing with it or being at a disadvantage in his fights, but I think he can maintain distance decently well. I think he can get in and out here. I think he could probably land some big shots on Abdulayev. I don't know if he finishes as him. He might. I don't know. It's one of these where I really don't have a ton of confidence. And like I said, I don't know what the line's at. If this line was a big favorite for either guy, I'd be surprised. I genuinely would be surprised if either gentleman is a big favorite. Gun to my head, if I had to line this fight, I'd say maybe Nascimento like minus 130. I think it's a pick'em, makes sense to me if it were a pick'em. Either guy being within a minus 150 favorite or less makes sense in my mind. If either guy comes out here as like a minus 350 favorite, go ahead and just bet the other side. Like if either one of them is a plus 300 underdog or a plus 200 underdog, you take a stab on that. Because I think this should be a decently even match. Like I said, I don't know what the odds are, but we will see when we get there. But for now, I got it as a low confidence pick. I could see either guy winning this one. So for now, I guess ever so slightly riding with Nascimento. But anyway, guys, that does it for the locks and traps video. If you guys liked the video, make sure to drop a like, drop a comment, subscribe if you guys are new. Let me know down below if there's anything you agreed or disagreed with. Thank you guys so much for all the love on the recent videos. We're going to be coming out later this week with the weigh-in recap and the best bets videos. So stay tuned for those. They'll be coming here shortly. But anyway, thank you guys once again for all the love on the recent videos. It's your boy Jacob from Topside MMA, and I'll see you guys soon. So peace.